We're good to go now.
All right, thanks, Chad. All right, good evening, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. This is the District Calendar Committee. We're meeting tonight to review a proposal to change the 2020-21 school calendar. We'll talk about the details in just a moment. As you know, this committee came together in the fall of last year to put together the calendar that we did put before the board. The board did vote into place and is currently posted on our website. But as you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic crisis, COVID-19, and the governor has given the boards some authority to change the calendar on an emergency basis in response to what we need to do to make sure that our students are in school, safely in school, and that our teachers and our staff have adequate time to prepare for that. So this evening, what we want to bring before you is a calendar that we've been working on at Dr. Poe and Mr. Turner's request. I think this is probably version, I don't know, Mr. Ford, this is version what, 4 or 5? I'm not sure at this point. 6, he's saying it's 6. He does a great job with that. We were looking for a calendar that met 3 criteria, really. The first one is that it needs to meet all of the statutory requirements. And I know that when Mr. Ford goes over the calendar with you, he will talk to you about what some of those requirements are. A calendar that gets our students back to school as soon as possible in a safe way, but we need them back in school. It's been a while. And then also a calendar that provides our teachers, our certified staff, enough time to prepare. As you know, in the spring, we left the classroom very abruptly, very quickly. Our teachers and staff did a tremendous job putting things together, superhero-like, really. But we know that looking back, that there are some things we could have done differently and done better, and we want to make sure that we give our teachers the resources and the time to prepare for that. Currently, at the beginning of the calendar that is in place, that time is not really there. So you will see that we've built in, or Mr. Ford in his draft and discussions that we've all had, that is built in. So Mr. Ford, if it's okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will put this proposed calendar up on the screen. Committee will give you a chance after he describes the process and describes the calendar itself. We'll give you a chance to ask questions and we can have a discussion. So go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Thank you, Dr. Detweiler. I'll give you just a second to share your screen to show the calendar that you're referencing so that everyone can see it while we're in discussion. No,
that's not it. That's the old one. Just a minute. Let's see. I was looking at that one earlier. Navigation. Hold on. Where is it? Just a minute. I'm going to unshare. I'm going to find it. I apologize. Just a moment here.
No problem.
Let's see. Okay, here we go. Turn it the right way. Okay. Share. There we go.
That's it.
That's it.
There we go. Okay, everyone, good evening. And I guess the best place to start is with a little bit of history. As Dr. Detweiler stated, we had a calendar for the school district that was approved on December 12th by the Board of Education for next school year. In preparing for several different types of circumstances that we could be facing, as information has come out of both the governor's office and the commissioner's office, we wanted to produce a calendar, as Dr. Detweiler stated, that met several variables. And I'm going to go over those with you now. The first variable that I want to discuss is student days. And I'm going to ask you to actually look at the end of the calendar in May, at May the 20th. And you're going to see a red box that has the number 172 in it. Historically, and I say historically based on the timeline that I've been your DPP since 2005, We have started the year with 175 student instructional days. And that doesn't mean we've always finished the year with 175 instructional days, as the board has the capability and the authority, I should say, to amend the calendar. And so we've finished the year anywhere from usually 171 to 175. I bring that to your attention because you see 172, we've already shortened the calendar for next year to 172 from the 175 with this model. Legally, we are required to meet 170 instructional days. And so we do that with this calendar simply by removing the 3 days. We still meet the state statutory requirement for the number of student days that students have to be in school. Also, students have to be in school a minimum of 1,062 instructional hours. Our calendar at day 170 actually meets that requirement, which is also in statute. So just because we've eliminated 3 days, we still meet the 2 primary statutes for student instruction, number of days and number of instructional hours. So now the question comes up, what did we do with those days? Now I need you to go back up to the top of the calendar to August, the second full week of August, please. You're going to see on August the 10th, a blue box with that's an O. It's not the number 0. That's the letter O. That stands for opening day. School districts are required to have, by law, 1 opening day and 1 closing day. That's our opening day, and that's for staff, for teachers, for classified staff that have to work so many number of days, 12-month staff, etc. After that opening day, you see a bank of 5 PD days. The PD day on August the 11th is consistent with the PD day that was approved with the original calendar back in December. 2 of the PD days are PD days that are in our calendar at all times. In our calendar, historically, we have had 2 professional development days, 2 professional days, you see those marked by P's, and 2 flex days. All of those days are referenced towards staff instructional workshop days and or activities within the school where staff works those days off. The PD days are just what they say they are. They are for professional development. So 2 of the days that we took away are then added up there, I'm going to say, for Friday, August the 14th, and then August the 17th as well. You see those days as PD days. So that bank of PD days was created to give schools, administration, and staff the opportunity to come together and prepare for whatever plan we utilize to bring children into the building, starting with August the 18th, where you see that red box with the number 1. So that's why those that bank of PD days is there. In conversations that I know have occurred with the different grade level principals, that was one of the things they asked for. And it was shared with me, 2 variables to kind of look back on what we did from March to May and plan forward using that information to get ready for bringing our children in on the schedule that we bring them in on for the new school year coming up. So that's where the PD days ended up, and we shortened the school year to give that bank of days. Throughout the calendar, you see a lot of similarities to this calendar and the calendar that was adopted by the calendar committee and then approved by the Board of Education in December. September, we have Labor Day Monday, September 7th. In October, 4-day weekend that has been consistent. In November, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for Thanksgiving. We went to the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday schedule about 5 years ago, and we've had no issues with it as far as student attendance, just coming to school on Monday and Tuesday. So that is stuck. December to January the 1st, you see 2-week Christmas vacation, which has been consistent for several years now. You see the holidays marked for Thanksgiving Day and for Christmas Day and for New Year's Day. I'm sorry, let me back up to November. November 3rd, that is a day where schools have to be closed. That is federal election day. By federal law, we cannot have school on that day. Our schools use as primaries, but the school district is required to be closed down. No matter what the election looks like for federal presidential election day, that law didn't change. So that's why you see on November the 3rd, the school district shut down. You look at January, same type of circumstance as November the 3rd, you see for January the 18th. That's Dr. Martin Luther King Day. Federal law, we close down the school district. Cannot be used for PD day, cannot be used for some type of workshop day, cannot be used for a makeup day. We have to shut the system, we have to shut the school district down. Again, federal law. In negotiations and conversations with our friends who are part of the Boone County Education Association, and I did see that both Ms. Wilson and Ms. Graves is on this meeting. We have a day in February where schools could waive February 13th and use that for some other type of activity, and that may offer a 3-day weekend in February. Same holds true for March. The flex in-service day on March 19th. Kids are not in school on the days where you see those yellow boxes. And so that could offer a 3-day weekend. We never know what Mother Nature is going to throw at us between December and March. And this year was a great example. She didn't throw anything at us. We had one snow day in February. So if we don't throw or insert those professional days and flex days into February and March, there's a good possibility that everybody will be in school from Dr. Martin Luther King Day, January 18th, all the way to spring break. And that can be a long haul, folks, without any snow days. So that's why those days are inserted in February and March to ensure a 3-day weekend. And again, that's a historical occurrence that's happened for many years. You see in April, spring break, the week of April 12th to 16th, that's the same spring break that was approved on the original calendar in December. And then we get into May, and I've already talked about the closing day on May 20th, day 172 for students. The actual closing day for staff without any snow days would be May 21st. That's why that's a blue day with a C in it. You see that May 18th is marked as a non-school day. That's the one day throughout this calendar that could become an option, meaning that would normally be primary election day. Now, currently, Boone County is not scheduled for any kind of primary election in May of 2021. Historically, there is not supposed to be a primary election scheduled for the May after the November presidential election. However, there is always the possibility that someone could retire. Jokingly, I've always said that we could have an abrupt retirement by the county dog catcher, which is an elected position. And we would have to hold a primary election in May with special permission. We would already have that day taken off. If we get to the April board meeting and the board wishes to adjust the calendar at the end based on the number of snow days or the lack of snow days and where graduation days may fall, etc., they could change May 18th from an X day to an instructional day to end the school year maybe quicker if necessary. And that is their authority. As I stated, only the Board of Education has the authority to approve a calendar for a school district and then amend a calendar for a school district. So we went ahead and took that day out with the idea that the board could make that an instructional day. That's the one day that if there is no primary election, they could make that an instructional day to help adjust for the end of the school year. But it's easier to make it an instructional day. I have found out in this position working on calendars than it is to take it away for mainly for parents and the community members. So this calendar that you see before you, it provides many variables that have already been stated. One variable that Dr. Detweiler talked about was statute, the number of days for students, the number of instructional hours for students, and the number of minimum school days for our teaching staff. The number of teaching days for staff by law is 185. We have a contract with our union that says we will have a school year for teaching staff of 187 days. So this calendar also fulfills the statute requirement for the minimum number of teaching days for staff, and it fulfills our contract for 187 days. Even though we've reduced instructional days, we've ramped up professional development days. We meet all the holiday requirements. We meet all the federal requirements. I will say that you see throughout the calendar orange boxes. For the purpose of this committee, you can ignore those boxes. Those boxes are for the good of my staff because that's where the attendance months end. And we are required with the completion of each attendance month to provide reports both to Mr. Turner for his informational packet to the board monthly, and then also to the Department of Education. So you can ignore the orange boxes. Those are for the good of my staff and or I should say, the school's attendance clerks within the building. So those aren't for any purposes in this conversation. The other piece that I do want to mention is the final variable is that this calendar does fulfill us meeting all requirements for no disruption in the salary schedule for both our certified and classified staff going into the new year. Very gracious to Mrs. Shield, and I saw that she is on this meeting. Very gracious to her for the amount of time that she has spent with me going through calendars. Because one thing that we don't want to do, if at all possible, at least I don't, this might be a personal opinion here, I don't want to disrupt salary schedule for any of our staff. And this calendar, where we start teachers, start the school year for our classified staff, and start our students, will not lead to any type of disruption or delay in salary schedule coming out of the 1920 school year into the 2021 school year. So that was a very significant variable that was brought up in our conversations with BCEA. I think both Mary and Bobby will agree to that. We have had conversations with them and shared that information. And also Ms. Shield. So without any questions, or if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Dr. Detweiler, that is a Reader's Digest version as best I can to
Great.
all of the variables that this calendar does provide for. And I've hoped that I've been able to put the information in a way that everyone on the committee understands what is required to go into a school year calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I'm going to ask you to talk about one more thing. I know that each year when we develop the calendar, there's some concern where the semester falls for the 4 high schools, and you did address that in this calendar. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, sir. If everyone would kindly look at December the 18th, you see instructional day number 82. Primarily, the discussion of the semester and where the first semester ends and where we begin the second semester is with 2 of our high schools. Both Connor High School and Boone County High School are on what are termed block schedules, 4x4 block schedules, which means the children take 4 classes for the school day first semester, and then they change and take 4 classes, new classes, second semester. In talking with those high school principals, we have asked them, in order to produce a viable, valid first semester, how many days of instruction would they need to fulfill the first semester before the Christmas break, so that we don't have to come back to school after the Christmas break, have a period of time where we finish the first semester, have final exams, and then start the second semester. We can have a clean break, ending the first semester prior to Christmas break, and then coming back, in this case, on January the 4th, and initiating a brand new schedule, new semester. In talking with both Mr. Wyckoff from Connor High School, Mr. Schlottman from Boone County High School, they support that an 82-day instructional day calendar for the first semester will suffice for them to validate a first semester, ending the instruction sometime during that week of December 14th to December 18th, and then offering a schedule for final exams to be taken quite possibly the 16th, 17th, and 18th. Now, that doesn't mean that the only conversation was with Connor High School and Boone County High School. Mr. Wilson has been a part of that conversation from Cooper High School, and I saw that he was on this Zoom meeting. Mr. Turner, when he was principal of Ryle, has been part of that conversation. Mr. Schaefer, the new principal at Ryle, has not been a part of that conversation yet, but Mr. Schaefer has been an assistant principal at Ryle, so he is aware. And then middle schools and elementary schools have come on board and come along with the idea of allowing the number of days for the first semester to be driven by the high schools. And that has sufficed. I know that in the past, both Cooper High School and Ryle High School have completed their first semester in the same process with Boone County High School and Connor High School, and ended the first semester with exams and end of course assessment exams that are required for the district's state accountability index with the same schedule. And then we've started second semester clean on the day we return from Christmas break. So again, we've had conversations with our principals, and they have supported the idea that an 82-day instructional calendar for the first semester will suffice and provide for a valid first semester. And then we'll start second semester on January 4th at day number 83 for the students.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
You're welcome.
I would also mention that there's a variation on this calendar that we'll discuss in just a few moments after we take some questions. Those PD days at the beginning, those 5 days that Mike described, those days would be used for obviously preparing curriculum, looking at class lists, making sure our teachers understand the instructional models that have been chosen. For example, if we choose to do a hybrid model of some online and some in school, however that looks. The teachers need time to prepare for that. We can't just ask them to come back and jump right in. So what I just wanted to mention, just wanted to give you a little bit of detail on how those days would be used. Also, I should mention to you that originally when we got together to look at calendars, we were requested to put together a calendar with a start date after Labor Day. And that came from the governor's suggestion to come up with 3 different calendars. The problem with that really was the payroll. There was a problem with payroll, just as Mike described, and it was too late. It was really too late to start. We wanted to get the kids into school. So with that, what questions do you have for us or for Mr. Ford about this calendar here?
Mr. Ford, I had a quick question, and it could just be, I know you said the teacher contract is 187 days, and I see we have 172 instructional days, but I only count 12 days for PD, flex, open, and close. So do some of the holidays count, or how does that come out to 187?
Yes, Dr. Brown, please count in the 4 holidays. In accordance with state statute, a school district must identify for teaching staff 4 holidays. So when you take into account the 172 for students, opening day and closing day, that's up to 174. The 9 PD, P and flex days takes us to 183. And then the 4 holidays by state law gives us the 187 to fulfill our teacher's contract, ma'am.
Thank you. I know I was probably missing something, so thanks, Mr. Ford.
You're very welcome, Dr. Brown.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we can come back with more questions if they arise. I should mention to you, we've had discussions with principals about these calendars. We've been meeting with the principal levels, the different levels independently, weekly. Last week, we introduced this calendar to them, and this week we did with the elementary principals yesterday, and tomorrow we'll talk to the middle school and high school principals. Today at the elementary principal meeting, there was a suggestion and a concern that was brought up that I want to bring before you just so we can talk about it. And I will count on Mrs. Best to make sure I'm conveying this information correctly. If you look at those 5 PD days, those days can be very, very intense. They are intense. They're intense anyway, even without COVID, whenever you have back-to-back PD days at the beginning of the school year. So there was a concern that was brought up that it's just too much back-to-back. It could be too much back-to-back if we're not careful. Would there be a way to spread out those PD days, still have opening day on the 10th, meaning that the teachers would still be there on the 10th, they would start that then, but maybe, for example, do the 11th and 12th, then take 2 days with nothing, then come back on the 17th and 18th, however we would spread them out. There are some concerns about that, however, and it has to do with our classified staff and how their work days fall. So I'm wondering if Mrs. Shield or Mr. Ford, would you want to explain to us the barrier in doing that? Or Charlie, maybe you want to, why that's a problem with the classified and how we schedule them?
I will give that to Mrs. Shield, Dr. Edward, please, because she has explained it to me. She can explain it much more clearly for the staff. So Mrs. Shield, I turn that over to you, please, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. With the classified staff, they complete timesheets, and their start date then will have an impact on when their first paycheck is generated. So there is a huge risk involved if we choose to pay classified staff when they haven't worked for a certain period of time and they're prepaid. We have the highest turnover in our staff with the classified. Typically the professional staff, you don't see the level of turnover. So if they start out being prepaid and then something happens where they leave, then the school district will lose out in payments, then not get any services in return. So yeah, this calendar, it's very critical when they can start. But I understood that they would also be asked to do some professional development as well. So
Yeah, that I think
Yes.
that is true, Linda. I think the problem is that on the days when there wasn't professional development. So if we started on the 11th with professional development, but on the 12th decided to take a break,
Mhm.
that doesn't impact certified staff, but it would impact classified, correct?
Well, it gets to the point if they're not working and we calculate even pay, and the risk being that they're paid for time that they haven't fulfilled yet.
Right.
It's just that same risk I described.
Okay. Kim, do you want to, did I do that justice? Do you want to explain maybe better what the request was?
You explained the request pretty well, and that was exactly what we were concerned about, that having all of those days of PD back to back, would we really get the full benefit of having teachers working with teams and planning? I did speak with a couple of teachers and they were worried about that. They almost thought that they would like to have a couple of days PD, a couple of days, not to say take a break, but even just kind of process things on their own and then come back fresh. So I guess where we were, other concern we had with that, I guess, is having students start on the 18th on a Tuesday. That was a conversation that was brought up, because if we should have to go to an A-B schedule, some alternate schedule perhaps, that would impact the level of service kids would get from the beginning. And we could potentially only have kids in the building, those that came, one day, and then may not see them for an extended period of time. I guess the question that we were kind of struggling with was if, and we understand the need for everybody to get paid, obviously, was if staff all starts certified and classified on the 10th, and we do even pay. So I understand the concern that if somebody decides not to come back, or because we do even pay, couldn't we deduct that at the end, Linda, from their even pay? So, whatever that final paycheck would come out if they had terminated early or chosen not to come those days.
That is a possibility, but we a lot of times don't get notification when a classified staff member leaves in time. So they're paid right up to the date that they turn that timesheet in.
Mhm.
And if they leave, if they have left the week before, then there's just not a great chance of getting those funds back. We haven't found good success in the past.
Yeah, the
Now-
other concern that we had, of course, was that, we would like as much time as possible to prep before we actually have students. I think teachers are still feeling that stress of being thrown into NTI so abruptly back in March. So, they're asking for as much time as possible. Not to say that they're not already working, because we know teachers are already working right now on June 30th about what's next year's going to look like. So, that's what they're looking for, is what's the best situation that would meet the needs of everybody.
Also, Jim,
Yes, sir.
maybe let's speak about schools that have waived PD and P days, and
Yes.
how that would possibly impact them. For instance, Cooper, we have 2 days that we've waived 3 total, but 2 PD days that have been waived to the 5th and 6th of August, and then a P day in February that was waived for parent conferences.
Right. So what we said is that we would be extremely flexible with that. We understand that at the school level, some things have been put into motion that can't be undone, and that are very important. I don't know what your PDs are, Mike, but I know that some of the principals have contracted with agencies to come in to give specific trainings on Leader in Me or whatever it is. So we would work with you, the individual schools, on an individual basis, and say, okay, if you PD on the 5th and the 6th, there'll be 2 days within those 5 days that you won't work. I should mention too, the nature of the PDs are probably going to be different than what we've ever done before also. I think teachers are unfortunately used to sometimes a sit and get. That's not really a good way of doing things. But what we're hoping is that we can have online modulars that they can do at their own pace. They have time to meet in PLCs with their principals, with their teachers. It's going to be much more flexible than maybe it has been in the past. Nevertheless, there's quite a bit to do. So, yeah, the wave days is a concern. I know we did talk with Mary and Bobby about those earlier. I'm wondering, Mary and Bobby, from the certified perspective, how, what do you think about this calendar? What do you think about the issue that the elementary principals brought up?
Okay, well, I'll talk because I've been thinking about this today. In thinking about the PD days, there's one thing that we hear as a constant complaint, and I can appreciate whatever teachers are saying, that they would rather have it spread out. And I understand the reasoning for it, but at the same time, the majority of the teachers, and I thought about this, can we even do a quick poll with them over the next couple of days just to see what they would want without releasing this calendar? But I think most of them want to have it done. I think right now you're going to come up with a concern. I think the bigger concern right now is more from the payroll standpoint, because, we already run into a situation every 3 or 4 years. I can't remember, Bobby, you maybe can tell me what it is, or Mike, if you can tell me that we have to hold a paycheck back because the way the calendar works. But we do our best beforehand to prepare them for the fact that they're going to have to budget a little better during the summer. And now all of a sudden we're telling them that they may have to take a week or 2 more weeks without pay if we move the calendar any more than what it is right now. I think this was the best compromise that we could come up with in support of still being able to keep the financial payroll schedule and allow those teachers to get that PD day in. I understand if we go, and there's so many variables, there's so many unknowns going on right now. If we do that AACBB schedule, that doesn't work for that first week. I understand that. So maybe there's a possibility that that PD of the 17th could be moved somewhere else. We can't even move it in August. I wouldn't even know where to play with that one day to allow us to start on that Monday. But I agree, it is rushed right up against the first day of school. So I see the difficulty in that, but at the same point, we don't even know what we're doing for the next school year. Bobby, I'm not sure if you want to say anything too.
Well, if the PDs are going to be ready and they're going to be more flexible in that people can take them on their own time and then come together on those actual PD times to discuss, or, we're having those. If the PDs are ready, why couldn't they waive them to that week before? And so you can do some modules during the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th. And that way you're not being inundated with them, but you've learned something early. And when it's time for the discussion on the 10, 11, 12, or 13, you're ready for it. Is that an option? Would that help the elementary schools?
I think the modules definitely, whatever modules are being put together, can be released as early as they're ready. So I think that there is flexibility in that. And as in all things with, with COVID-19, what we're trying to do with the schools, we should remain flexible anyway. We want to make sure the teachers have what they need and feel comfortable. Kim, does that in any way, does that in any way lighten the burden? And it doesn't buy us more time, but it kind of spreads it out.
Yeah, I think we could entertain that if we would have the flexibility. So if we have modules prepared, if teachers were given the flexibility to do those modules on their own the week before, and then we could have a lot more flexibility with, the 13th, 14th, and the 17th even. I think they might go for that. They might soothe that problem a little bit more. Yeah, I just, I know that I completely get the payroll situation, but yeah, I think if we could get some more flexibility, so that the last thing we want is for teachers to be completely burnt out and stressed before school even starts.
Too late.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that
worse.
Yeah, the other thing that concerns me, Jim, is if we put X days in there so that we're spreading those PD days out and moving in, we're not going to get the 82 days in for the high schools to get their first semester in. We will definitely be cutting into that. And I know it was a compromise for them to get the 82 because they like 85, 86. If you cut the calendar in half, they're getting 86 days. And we always kind of try for the 2 high schools. But I understand the elementary people are going to have to build curriculums. So I get where they're coming from during those PD times. But I think, maybe doing it early and letting people do it on their own, that's just a nightmare of who did it and who didn't do it, and keeping track of hours, which I think is better to deal with than trying to cut off our high schools prior to the middle.
That's a good point, Bobby. Thank you.
That, and if I can, Jim, the one concern I would have would be, your classified staff paras are in. So now if teachers aren't in and paras aren't in, they're not going to do anything ahead of time before opening day. In the end, I don't want to find out I got people with short contract days
Right.
because they didn't show up. I mean, that's my main concern. If the teachers aren't in, what are the classified going to do? Because like I said, if they stay home, at the end of it, we're going to find out they short and didn't fulfill a contract.
Jim, Dr. Delwa, if I may,
Yeah.
if I may piggyback on Charlie's commentary there about contract days. Another thing I want to add for the same staff that Charlie is talking about, and I've learned this from Linda in all the conversations that we had, if we bring in the kids that fourth week of August, and we don't bring the kids in till the 24th, then we've got classified staff who will not receive a paycheck until September the 4th. And so on top of being concerned about the reduction in contract days, one of those staff members that I'm talking about actually works in my department. She works when the kids are in school. And out of respect for her and for our many, many other 180-day employees that Charlie's, I think, alluding to in part of his conversation. Charlie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't want to go to those people and tell them that they're not going to get a paycheck until September, when other people are going to be getting paid in August. And that's out of respect for a very dedicated group of staff that we have within the district. So I support what Charlie's saying, and I just wanted to add that on top of it, that as part of that support, not holding off a paycheck on those individuals until Friday, September the 4th. And Bobby, I want to applaud you. I think you bring up a great point. If we back up that start date for kids to the 24th, that's 4 days that we would lose. That would take us down to 78 days for the first semester. And I can assure you right now that both Mr. Schlotman and Mr. Wyckoff cannot support that to end their schedule cleanly the first semester. They would have to come back after the holidays and go through an exam schedule. And when part of the exams, this is the conversation that they've shared with me, when part of the exams are end of course assessment exams that are not only final exams, but they're part of the school accountability index towards the state assessment model, they don't want that long break. They want the kids to be able to come out of the class, have a 1 or 2 day review period, and take their final exams and end of course assessment exams all there while the material is fresh on their minds, and not have to worry about coming back after a 2-week break or longer. We have had Christmas breaks that have been extended because of Mother Nature. So I can assure you, and I just want to reiterate what Bobby was saying, we've got high school principals that can't endorse that model, reducing the number of days any lower than the 82. So Bobby, Bobby and I have been doing this together for 15 years. We can share each other's commentary and thoughts. And Bobby, I just want to applaud you for catching that, because that's a huge point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Charlie, for your comments too. Shauna's texting me that Ryan has a question in the chat box, but I cannot see the chat box while I'm sharing my screen. So Shauna, would you read the question? Do you mind?
Let's see. Is the PD going to be all new topics based on district and school COVID procedures, or is it PD that was voted on and approved by SPDM Council? To me, the topics of PD would really determine whether it's best to spread it out or have it together.
It's a great question, Ryan. Thanks. I think the thought is the addition of the PD days was to accommodate the new models that we have to put into place, models that we've never tried before. I should also mention, because this is on YouTube and it's live, we haven't decided on what those models are yet. We're still working with the principals and with the district office to try to identify what would be the best model in terms of online instruction, something hybrid, schedules, which are A/B schedules, all of that. but we do understand that whatever we do is going to be new. Now, some of the days that have been waived, like I said earlier, that were contracted by the school, those came through site-based councils. Those would still be honored if need be. And I should ask the principals to maybe comment on this, but in the principals meetings, we did ask them if they thought that they could support changing some of those, or going to councils and asking council to change out of the necessity of the emergency nature of the situation. So that's a very good question. I think it would be a combination of both. Principals, do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, that we talked about that in the elementary meeting, that was definitely something that we were fine to be flexible with, and we felt that our councils would go along with that. I know several of us that are leader in me schools do have contracted PD days, so we were just going to work around that. Of course, most of our topics that we're going to be talking about will kind of lead into some challenges that we may have this year anyway. But the consensus was that we were willing to just ask our councils to make those changes.
And the same applies for high school. We were all on board of willing to be flexible and can go to our council as needed.
Sorry about that. What other questions do you have? Anyone? Comments?
Just a quick question about the pay, because I know that it may come up with the elementary group. What is the pay date now? The first pay date? Linda, do you have that? So if this calendar goes the way it is, what would be the pay date
Yes.
for everyone?
That first pay date is scheduled to be the 21st. Our procedure is the second Friday after the teachers start.
Yep.
So just to talk about next steps, and Mike, Mr. Ford, I'm going to ask you to help me out with this too. The statute, this process is a little bit different than what we do normally. There's a statute that governs this body, the committee, and how we make recommendations to the board. In this case, however, it's my understanding that really the board can just act unilaterally as needed. Is that true?
Yes, sir. The statute directs that a calendar committee adopt the original calendar for a school district. We did that in December. We did that in the fall, late fall, and that calendar was adopted on December the 12th by the board. After the original calendar is adopted, then the board has the authority to amend the calendar based on situations. Obviously, this is deemed as an emergency situation in preparation due to the virus. What we have done here tonight is to continue to work in terms of a very transparent district for communication purposes to share this information with the calendar committee. No disrespect to anyone on the committee. We do not need, this committee does not need to adopt this calendar. I know that Dr. Brown, representative to this committee from the board, is on this meeting. She spoke earlier. And so what we could do is if, what I would recommend, Dr. Detweiler, if I may, ask, if everyone's okay with this calendar, again, it does not require a vote, but in working as a transparent, open communication district, we want to share this information. It's a huge undertaking. It's a very big change. We're not talking about 4 or 5 snow days. We're talking about a significant impact to a calendar that was already adopted for next school year. So to do the due diligence of communication and being open with the committee, and then look to asking Mr. Turner to move forward, possibly at the July board meeting, for an adoption of an amended calendar by the board. And again, that's not even required at this stage, but it must be completed. If we amend the original calendar, it must be completed by the end of the school year. So we could do this now with the board. We could provide this information to the board as an FYI, and ultimately look at one amendment in April that would include this calendar that you have before you tonight. And I did see where Dr. Brown, and it didn't surprise me. I've worked on many committees with Dr. Brown. She's requesting input from the committee in moving forward to be able to take information to the board. And again, knowing Dr. Brown and working on several committees with her, it didn't surprise me that that item came up in the chat box from Dr. Brown. So that's next steps moving forward. We can ask the board to amend with a vote, or we could wait to the end of the year with all final amendments to the calendar and ask the board to amend one time. That's at the discretion of basically the superintendent.
Mr. Ford, I know one of the things I've heard in some of the conversations with principals is they kind of are trying in their heads to sequence this massive behemoth they have before them. And they kind of see, I need a calendar. And then once I have a calendar, I need to see who's coming back to my building, teachers, staff, students. And then I need to try to figure out how I'm going to service the people that are coming back. And like, so I think they're like cogs. And I think this is a keystone cog that we need to make sure that we get right for as many people as possible, so that we can set them up to make all the decisions that need to be made at the school building level. And I wish them good luck with that.
Dr. Brown, I could not agree with you more. This calendar, or the calendar, as for any school district, is the first step. We adopt a calendar as, think about the pieces of the puzzle. We've got the outline. This is the first step. Now we start fitting the pieces into the calendar. And so, but before we, in my opinion, and again, this is just professional opinion from many years of experience working on school year calendars, we've got to have this first before we can move forward. And I know in respect to, for example, Ms. Best and Mr. Wilson, we got to have this so they can move forward to set up their plans. And so I would hope that we could move forward and get this an adoption of a calendar out of respect for all of our principals, so that they can start putting their plans in place of who's going to be in the buildings on what day, and they can move to the next step. This is step one. They can't move to the next step without knowing what days are going to be part of the calendar. So I couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Brown.
So Dr. Brown's request is, what's your input? What can she take back? If you haven't spoken and you want to provide some input, this would be a good time to do that. We want to hear from everyone. Tomorrow after this meeting, I'll share, the notes from the meeting with Mr. Turner and what the pros and the cons were of the different versions we talked about. And then I'm sure that he would then contact the board chair and have a discussion on whether it's time to move forward or not. Anyone?
He has started some conversations with us already, so we know this is coming down the pipe. And I mean, we clearly, short of ordering unicorns and fairies, we'll do anything we can to make this, I can't say painless, but we want to help, but we can't see all the hurdles. So we need you guys to see the hurdles so we can try to run into as few as possible.
Dr. Delweiler, I have a comment.
Yes.
If PD day is on that Monday and then school starts on Tuesday, I would be a little hesitant not knowing the teaching method that's going to go on. I think someone else had mentioned it before too. I wouldn't want some set of students to already get behind because their days were Monday and Tuesday maybe on campus, and now they just have one day. So that worries me, not starting a full week. But again, I'll just defer onto how the modulars and the teaching methods that will be used.
Jim, I know that we talked about that, what Mary said earlier, AACBB thing going on, but I believe that the C day in the middle of that was for remediation or for those kinds of things. And I don't think on the second day of school, we're going to need remediation. So we could just make that first week AABB, no C's, and then everybody would be together.
Yeah, there will be many ways to do it. And again, I feel like I need to say this because it's a public meeting. We have not chosen any model. We have not chosen A, B, B, C, D. We haven't chosen that yet, but we have talked about a lot of different ideas. And as Bobby said, one of those ideas provides a day where students who need extra work or the teachers need to do some extra planning and meeting could be built in. So I do agree, Bobby, that that could be a way that we could alleviate some pressure and move one of those.
Hey,
If that's-
Jim.
Yes.
Hey, two comments. I would kind of echo what Mike had talked about in regards to the calendar. You know, from an Infinite Campus perspective, that calendar is the foundation for everything. So without a calendar, an accurate calendar in the system, nothing works correctly with our student database system. So a decision does need to be made in a timely fashion. This really benefits everyone for it to be resolved fairly soon. And then from a communication perspective, I think, you know, our community and our staff and our faculty and everyone needs to know, you know, what we're going to be doing, because those questions keep coming, you know, every day. When is school starting? When is school starting? And, you know, we're saying, well, we know we're going to have in person and probably choice, but we don't know when. So we do need to move forward as quickly as we can, in my opinion.
I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you. As you know, the next board meeting, I think, is July 16th. So we can pass that along to Mr. Turner tomorrow that, you know, we believe time is of the essence. We can do that.
Yeah. Hey, and this is Kim, and I'm really, you know, I've listened to all this, and from a parent perspective, I'm not really sure that I can offer much. I mean, a lot of this is really about the teachers and about the professional development. I mean, you know, I applaud you guys. I mean, just really the amount of work and the thought process to put something like this together. I mean, there's not an easy solution. There's nothing normal about this. I'm stumped. I don't really, you know, I mean, how do you choose the best of the worst options? I guess not what we would want, but you know, I certainly think about the teachers and having to full blown go in for a whole week of PD with no rest or no downtime. But also the classified's got to get paid. I mean, they just have to get paid.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment. I think we want to be careful not to, you know, basically trade one pressure for another one. You know, trade one pressure on one group of people and cause pressure on another. Take one away. We don't want to do that. That would be not a good way of doing things. I also wanted to mention, Mark put in the comments that Mrs. Rootman was hoping for a day for mental health SEL training, and that actually is definitely a priority for us. We know that everybody's been through trauma, the students have, the teachers have, everybody in the community has. So we have to be able to approach education from that viewpoint and through that lens. So yes, Mark, absolutely, that's a priority. Anything else? We're coming up on the hour here. Any other comments?
Dr. Brown, do you have enough information that you can go back to the board, or do you need to know anything else?
Oh, I think you guys have all brought up good points, and I think we definitely appreciate that it takes a village, and you guys are our village, so we can't see everything, and I think we're all going to learn to be flexy and adaptable and just do the best we can. So that's, you guys let us know, and we'll try to do that. So.
I have a quick late comment. Sorry.
Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
I think the calendar looks great. I think an elementary thing that I hear from teachers are when you know, we have to be ready for back to school fest or things like that.
Hey, Ryan, you're breaking up badly. I don't think we can understand you. Do you want to type that in the comment line? Can you type that? Well, then we can try to address it. While he's doing that, any other last comments?
Just a comment from me. Is there any thought to having all the districts go just to the same scheduling at this point so that we can remove a wrinkle? I know over there's some no's, there's some yeses and stuff like that, but you know, and I applaud the support to, you know, I have twins that go to Boone County High School that are on the block scheduling. I mean, any more reduction in days, instructional days, would not be equitable for those students. It's got to stay.
When you say the districts, are you talking about the clusters, the different clusters?
Yeah, or just, you know, like how to get the schools on the same schedules, you know, so that we don't have to, I mean, it's a wrinkle that has to be addressed, and it's always as part of the equation here.
Right.
As we're adapting to a new normal, you know, we can imagine and dream, you know, going forward.
Right. That's a good question, Kim. So you're referring to 2 high schools on a block, 2 high schools on a bell schedule.
Correct.
And I know, Mike, maybe you want to, Mike Wilson, maybe you want to comment on this. I know that the high school principals meet all the time and talk about possibilities. I do think that a few things that'll come out of this is I think we'll come out on the other side next year with some brand new things, whether it be what you're talking about, Kim, or ways of instruction or different schedules, just because we'll realize, wow, that really worked really well. Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, yeah. And, you know, the 4 high school principals, we work very well together and have conversations, you know, about various things, and we can bring this up. Ultimately, in the state of Kentucky, all schools are governed by site-based or school-based decision-making, SBDM, and they are the ones who actually set that schedule of block or traditional or trimester or whatnot. So while we're all work together collaboratively, there's pros and cons to all the schedules. And a lot of districts with multiple high schools do have different schedules just because of that caveat in Kentucky, where councils are the ones who set that school's schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, we are at 2 minutes over time, really. So I really thank you all for joining us this evening and for your comments. Thank you for your support. If you have additional comments after this meeting, I would be glad to answer any questions. Just give me a call. I know Mr. Ford would be willing to answer questions as well. So thank you very much. And I think we'll adjourn at 7:32. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.